So my name is Chirag Creek. I now work at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I was born in India, but my parents moved when I was under 1 year old to the United States back in the 70s to be able to pursue a dream for their new child. And I had to live with my grandparents for 2 more years until they built enough money. My dad was a pharmacist, my mom was a school teacher. When they came to America, my dad worked as a maid at the Marriott hotels. My mom worked as a draftsman and a seamstress in different jobs to make enough money to come over for me. Then they finally got me over when I was 3. I ended up, like most kids, wanting to become, well, garbage man was the first job I wanted, actually. And then eventually I ended up seeing a space shuttle launch, similar to the one that Dr. Magnus was on, and I became interested in being an astronaut. And then I wanted to become an astronomer because I saw these old National Geographic magazines of planets out there. And then when I went to high school, I became very interested in math, and my teacher told me math and science, well, that's an engineer. So I went and got my undergraduate degree in Ohio at the University of Cincinnati as an aerospace engineer. And I was going to build the next generation satellites going to Pluto and to Jupiter and Saturn. And instead, I went and I became basically a space spy is probably the best way to call it. I used all of my engineering skills to try to understand what other countries' space programs are doing and how their militaries were operating using space capabilities. And I used all of my reverse engineering techniques, my engineering skills, to be able to understand that. Something you don't think about. When you grow up, you want to be an astronaut. I wanted to be an astronaut. But then you end up becoming more and more aware that there's this whole other world, what we call national security space, that's out there. So that was my first job. And then I got to come to the Washington, D.C. area, and I ended up becoming, I worked over for the intelligence community to help run the whole space intelligence community, as we call it. And then one day I received a phone call that said, hey, why don't you come down to the White House? We have a meeting that we need to talk about. And I helped write President Obama's national space policy when I was in the intelligence community. I go to the White House, and they say, hey, let's have some lunch. I have some lunch. We're going up into the top secret room to talk about space, top secret space stuff. And my predecessor at the time tells me, oh, by the way, you're interviewing for my job to be President Obama's director for space policy. And so I got the job. And for 6 years, I got to be President Obama's director, helping on all types of things for commercial space and national security space, defense, and intelligence. And we really got to do a lot of really fun and interesting things. I did that job for 6 years. I left in 2016. Upon leaving, my parents showed up and got to have a meeting with the president in the Oval Office, and an amazing moment it was for me. And now I work in the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. That means nothing to anybody. Unless you say CIA, nobody knows anything else about the intelligence community. But we're the eyes in space. So all of our top secret spy satellites that take pictures, it's my organization that assesses them. What's on the other side of the mountain? What's North Korea doing? What's Syria doing? And so on and so forth. So it's a really fascinating, incredible world where you require STEM knowledge. You need to understand science, whether it's science in space or what's happening on the ground. How does a nuclear reactor work? How does a missile work? That's the type of knowledge that we need. So that's where I am now. To the students, you're at the age right now where literally when we launch people to Mars, it'll be your generation. But also, it's your generation that's going to build the next generation. GPS satellite, that's a DoD system. And you use GPS every day. But the students, you never know where you're going to go. And to the parents, thank you very much for taking the time and energy to support them and guide them. So much credit to my parents. And when I had that opportunity at the Oval Office with my parents a couple years ago, I sit back and think, did they ever think when they left India back in the early 70s that they would be, in the center of the free world with their son and have an opportunity to have what they did. So thank you to the parents for all your encouragement to the kids. Thank you.
It is a real pleasure to be here with you today, and just to share a little bit about my background and STEM journey. I was one of those precocious kids that would read anything I could get my hands on. By the time I was 3 years old, I had already graduated from most children's books and the Nancy Drew series and Hardy Boys and all those kinds of things, and was reading full-fledged novels. The public schools wouldn't take me because I was too young, and so my parents had to find other outlets for me. Eventually, I was able to just really explore so many different things as a young child. My family of immigrants from Italy. I was born here in the United States, so most of my family did not have any kind of college education, didn't even graduate from high school. Now, my parents did have some opportunities. My mother was a Spanish teacher, so we spoke English and Spanish and Italian at home. My father actually had started at Carnegie Mellon University, pursuing a degree in electrical engineering, and he felt like he was teaching the professors and they weren't teaching him. So he decided to drop out of CMU and just chart his own path as an electrical engineer, which he did. He worked for General Telephone Electric, for any of you who might remember GTE, and he used to take me along on all the missions. He did a lot as an engineer installing trunks, if that's familiar to any of you, and the programming of them. And so I just kind of tagged along, and I learned about engineering and science in a very natural way. And then when my parents weren't watching, I'd go down to the basement of our house and I'd pull out all of his old equipment and I would start testing it on things in the house. I'm probably lucky I didn't electrocute myself or do something that was more injurious to my family. And then when I left to go to college, I was a computer science major, interested in programming. And I worked 6 jobs to put myself through college. Even though I was the first person to win a GTE scholarship, because they had started it the year that I was going to college, it wasn't enough to cover the costs. My parents couldn't necessarily afford everything. And so when I went to college, I really worked around the clock. And I made it until my sophomore year as a computer science major, but they required students at that point to have their own computers and their own modems, for those of you who remember the old dial-up modems, and I couldn't afford it. And I was too proud to ask for help. So I switched my major. My major at that point was communications, and I got a degree in that. However, with my strong science and math background, I started teaching just because I love learning. I'm a true lifelong learner, and that's what drew me back to schools. And I started by teaching English, then I taught mathematics. So I used to joke with all my students, because sometimes I'd have them for both. So I said, I'm going to tap both sides of your brain today. And I was fortunate to develop a course for Frederick County Public Schools. It was called Analytical Thinking and Problem Solving. And so I really was able to incorporate and infuse a lot of science into that. Eventually, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do within education. I got a degree in administration, went on to do a variety, I would say, of administrative positions. And then one day, I was printing out my letter of resignation because I wanted to go back into the IT world. I'd had a job offer, I had still been staying current with programming kinds of things, and so it's no joke. My letter was printing out on the printer when I got a phone call from the deputy superintendent at the time, and he asked me if I would be a principal of one of the schools in the district, and I really didn't want to. And he said, well, would you just give it a shot, go over, visit the school? And I did, fell in love with the students there in that one visit and decided to stay with education, and have really never looked back. And I would say that in some of my journey as not only building level administration, but also district level administration, it's given me an opportunity to apply so many different skills. While I was in Frederick County, I had an opportunity to become the chief operating officer, the first female COO of the school district. And I oversaw facilities, safety and security, finance, communications, human resources, and earned some industry certifications along the way. I am an internationally certified facilities manager, so I can fix your all of your coolers, your chillers, your HVA systems. I always carry a tool bag in all my vehicles. I also have a commercial driver's license, a full CDL. So not only do I drive school buses, but I can also drive tractor trailers, which is fun. I'm also a certified FEMA responder. I have actually served, unfortunately, as the incident commander at an active shooting. And because of my background in incident command, we were able to successfully mediate that situation and really bring it safely under control. Those are really some lattice kinds of experiences that I've had in life. I often give people advice to not take just the ladder rungs that go in one dimension to that defined end. Find different ways. I was a computer science major, English teacher, math teacher, analytical problem solving, incorporated math, building level administrator, district level administrator, overseeing curriculum development, but now I'm driving school buses and fixing HVAC systems. I had an opportunity to go out to California, and I was superintendent of a school district out there, was able to learn some West Coast things, and let me tell you, when you think that California is replete with technology, they are not. In the year 2015, the schools in the district where I served, they did not have any wireless access, which was a shock to me. So within 1 year, I made sure that all the schools in my district had that, so that way students were able to use technology. And it's just been a real pleasure and a joy. So when I look at the students in my school, I'm so very proud of them. We just had them up here. Those were my students sharing with you their behavior model. And they come in just so curious, and they can't get enough learning. They just soak it up. And it's so incredible to see that happen. And I would like to encourage all students and families here to just really think about passion and what do you love to do? What really inspires you? What do you like to learn? And whether you want to be a master of all trades or perhaps just focus on just one area, whatever it is, make that happen for yourself. Don't be afraid, be courageous, find people along the way. If I had a do-over, which I don't live a life of regrets, I could have asked for someone maybe for some help so I could have had a computer and a modem in college, but I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because I've had another wonderful journey along the way where I've been inspired by STEM throughout my life, and now I'm living a dream by being the principal of one of the absolute best schools in the nation and I would say in the world. So thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Actually, the last time that I was up here was during 8th grade graduation. As many of you know, I'm a 12-year, I was a 12-year student of Nysmith. I'm currently a junior at TJ. And I'm fortunately very involved with many different projects at TJ. But I have to say, Nysmith really helped me instill my love for learning. Nysmith gave me the opportunities. It really sparked my curiosity for science. And I distinctly remember learning about astronomy and being absolutely fascinated with the different planets. And now I'm fortunate enough to be working on a project that is launching a satellite called TJ Reverb. So I'm also involved with many other things at TJ, and I'm also involved with SheSoft. So SheSoft is my nonprofit, and we're dedicated to bridging the gender gap in technology by having a competition and conference for 5th through 8th grade girls. Now, I'd like to give some more background about myself. I shared with you my story about astronomy and how I got really interested in science because of that. But my parents, they both work in technology, and as a result, ever since I was a little child, I was always solving complex problems with Sudoku or really solving different problems. I wrote my first computer program in 3rd grade. And ever since then, I've been extremely passionate about technology. And I really hope to instill the same love for learning and love for technology in students in middle school through my nonprofit. And I really thank Nysmith, my parents, and TJ for giving me so many different opportunities to explore my passions. Thank you very much. You know, being in Nysmith, you get exposed to science, technology, engineering, math, STEM every single day. And it's not something tedious. You really love science. You really love technology. And you're going into class and you have such supportive teachers. And it really sparks it really helps keep that passion going. And I do have to say that Nysmith really helped me get interested in STEM. And also events such as the STEM Symposium. So I've actually attended every single STEM Symposium, except for last year because I was at Regional Science Fair, which was actually funny because last year I actually won STEM Rising Star Award. But yeah, so just going to all of these events and having such supportive parents, it really helped build me up to the person who I am today. And being a junior at TJ is a lot of hard work, and it's also an amazing school with a lot of different opportunities, and I really enjoy having those opportunities as well.
Great, thank you. Dr. Bonadabas.
TJ is equally, I think, a really inspiring and engaging place, and one of the things that is really, I think, a challenge, because we talk about all the amazing things that happen, but what are some of the challenges there too? It's about staying fresh and innovative. You know, sometimes we worry that we discovered the secret sauce maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and we're afraid to change the recipe or do something different in our program design and how we approach teaching and learning. And the students who were up here just a moment ago that talked about how we need to be responsive and reflexive to student needs is really, really important. And our faculty has very meaningful conversations about our mission and vision as a STEM school, because we know that that's why we exist. We are not, as I'd like to emphasize, we are not an Ivy League prep academy. Everything that we do is just not about making sure that students get into the most select kinds of colleges. We exist for the love of STEM, and we just happen to have a really robust complementary program of humanities and arts. And it really gives students I would say, a well-rounded background for their future. And somebody mentioned, I think in opening remarks, about GPS and how a GPS system can guide. And at TJ, where it can be an environment where we focus so much on GPA, I like to flip that around and say, no, really it's about being a GPS. It's our role as educators and leaders in education to be that guide for students. We know that every once in a while, that pathway may result in a detour. There might be some bumps in the road. Sometimes we may take a wrong turn. Sometimes we might find that speed pass lane so we can really accelerate. But that's what we do for our students. Find their way, find their path. There's 100 ways to get from point A to point B, and it's our role at TJ to help students find that way.
Parikh.
So I'll answer that question in a second. I already have a follow-up comment. In the places that I've had the opportunity to work, I've worked with people who have gone to these incredible, crazy Ivy League schools, who've had the fortunate opportunity to go to schools such as here and TJ and other places. And that is a huge head start in life. But even if you don't end up in those kind of places, I went to a public high school. I went to a public university. It was the furthest university from my hometown with still being in-state tuition, so that was good. We couldn't afford going to Caltech or to MIT. And it just requires knowing, to your GPS element, where do you want to go? It's nice to have a head start of where you start, but in the end, I'm sitting next to this person who went to Harvard, and this person went to Yale, and this person went to MIT. And we're all equally responsible for different things. So consider yourselves very lucky that you have the opportunity to be here. And then for me, back to the question, is the fact of what inspired me. It was literally watching a space shuttle launch. I'm like, yes, that was it. Most studies say the spark for STEM, the spark for space, is about your age. And you can carry that through your entirety. What you know about space growing up, what I knew about space was NASA. I'm here to tell you there's a whole other side of space. It's the dark side of space, but it's fun. So it's the national security side as well. And what I love about it, what keeps the passion going for me, in other sectors, it's very segmented between academic, between defense, between civil, between commercial. I can jump from here to NASA, to a company, to an academic institution. For me, space STEM is I'm very passionate about that because we have an overlap of our communities. When we get together, it's not just one community or just the other community. The people who are doing NASA have to talk to the Department of Defense. The people in the intelligence community have to talk to the commercial community. And really, space is a community, not just on orbit, but within, especially in the DC area. And so that really keeps me really excited and allows me to hopefully bend the arc of history, not just ride along the path there.
Great, thank you. I'm trying to find people that want to ask. We got a question. Here we go. Because I will call on people. I'm not shy.
So, a quick question about, there are different STEM-related opportunities available everywhere. However, I wanted to know about the outreach programs that you guys have in your organization or organizations like you. I hear from few organizations that do not through school or not through any other, marketing or anything. So what is the best way to find out outreach opportunities in different organizations?
From a school district perspective, my best advice to you is to always contact the school district's science department. Oftentimes, the STEM outreach coordinators work in the science departments there, and they're able to give you a whole list of opportunities at all of the different schools that are there. So really start at the district level to find out everything in a region. And I would also just say that some individual schools, they will advertise things on their websites for different kinds of events. You probably saw some exhibitors here today advertising their events as well. So just stay in tune with those, but really start at the district level.
So where I work, we're not going to hire you yet. Sorry, kids. But we do have interns when you're undergraduates and when you are graduate students, where we will actually pay for you to get your top secret clearance, and we'll give you specific projects to work on. So that's one thing to think about. Within the government, we have loan forgiveness programs as well, so that's an opportunity to continue forward. I would say a few areas that you might want to look at in the world that I live in, of course, is NASA's Office of Education has just go onto their website. They have tons of opportunities. But for the women in the audience, there is a program called Women in Aerospace. That's a beautiful organization to work with. There's another organization called the Galaxy Explorers, all helping K-12 STEM purposes. They provide scholarships, they provide hand-on opportunities, they provide mentorship, and then there's another organization that we were just at just last Friday night, I think, the Goddard Memorial,
Goddard Memorial Symposium, yeah.
Yes.
And AAS, American Association of Science.
Right, and a lot of the professional, we had somebody earlier talk about electrical engineering. There's professional societies in electrical engineering, aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, and so on and so forth. So the real challenge is there's so much out there. How do you actually prioritize what it is want? But it's the individual to your right that can help prioritize that.
Yeah, I'll add if the DHS desk that's over in the Silver Wing, it's not posted yet, so you're not too late. But summer program for high school students to get summer internships for high school students, specifically around cyber. So the new CIRA organization that's focused on cyber, or CISA, I should say, It has high school programs. But, and I'll put in a little plug, last year on this panel, Anna Lelouchi was the panelist, and I hired her as a summer intern. So that's the other way, is to network when you're at these kind of activities. So would you like, how are you doing on finding internships and projects to work on?
Well, I guess I can speak to my experience as a student. So when I was younger, like middle school, elementary school, I would find a lot of opportunities through my school, so through Nysmith. And TJ also offers a lot of different opportunities. And mainly I would find my opportunities through the school. So I would definitely like check in with the school and with like friends. Another thing that I would definitely recommend if you're a girl in middle school is to participate in Chisoft, because yeah, it's from 5th through 8th grade, so definitely consider that. That's a really great opportunity as well. But yeah, one of the things that TJ actually has is an internship fair, and so that's how I got my internship for this summer.
That's called earned media, as opposed to advertising.
What do you think STEM will look like 10 to 20 years from now?
What do you think STEM is going to look like 10 to 20 years from now?
That is the hardest question I've ever heard in my life. I think before you look forward, let's look backwards for a second. 20 years ago, the internet was barely taking off at that point. It was unimaginable what GPS did for society, right? And it's one of these things which is trying to predict where it's going to be is so challenging, because it takes a natural evolution of creative minds who take, you know, unique capabilities, who develop new capabilities, but also develop ones. With respect to STEM, I mean, I'll try to answer it in a very direct manner here, not just the high-level element. I personally believe technology is going to become smaller, which is not really that far of a discussion, but where it's going to be embedded. You were already talking about wearable technology, but I think there's going to be a connection between the biology of people and the technology that's out there, and where that takes us, how that takes us. I leave that up to you to determine, but as we get more horsepower with smaller and smaller materials, and hopefully less toxic materials, I think that's one thing. And then the other thing I think on technology is, I think with all the stuff that's going on with climate change, I think a lot of technology in the next 10 to 20 years is heavily going to be focused on trying to counter some of the effects that are going on right now.
When TJ was formulated in the 80s, I think that the school helped define what STEM was in the nation. And now when we look back 30 plus years, it almost looks like a very traditional kind of approach, put on the white lab jacket or sit in front of a computer terminal. But STEM is so much more. We know that it's gone beyond that. And I recently saw a presentation that talked about backcasting was the term that was used. And one of the examples in it was an old cartoon from the 1960s, I believe, the Jetsons. And it showed how on that particular show there were, automated vehicles, autonomous vehicles. They could fly. We could call them flying saucers, but there were autonomous kinds of things. There were the equivalent to escalators in a way, but people movers that went along. They were able to talk to their boss through their watch on their wrist. They were able to exercise through a video screen, kind of, like the modern day, bikes that you can ride and the virtual reality pieces. That was in the 1960s. So the question becomes, did we get where we are today because people were able to look into the future and they backcasted to get to the point in the future, or did they not see a limit on the future and did they just innovate and just push forward? And it's really hard to tell. You can be an armchair quarterback and look back and wonder how we got here. But I would agree that the integration of everything with biosystems is really where things are headed. So much that's happening now with machine learning and autonomous kinds of things. And we can't lose sight of the fact that despite what the science will do for us, what the machinery will do for us, what the technology will do for us, the human factor cannot be forgotten. The human factor cannot be forgotten. Humans are going to be responsible for the ethics behind our future. It's still the interpersonal relationships that are going to be very important. So despite everything that takes off, we have to remember who we are as well.
And that 10 to 15 year time horizon, Kirthi, is going to be your early career cycle. So where do you see yourself in that?
Yeah, so I've always had this dream of creating a startup company in tech, and there's that. But just to answer the previous question a little bit, from what I've read and from what I've seen, the future really lies not just in integration, but also in innovation. So really thinking about how the technology can, what's new. So really, if we lived back 30, 40 years ago, we wouldn't really think about having a cell phone in our pocket. That's something completely crazy, something completely new. And I really hope to be part of that new tech that'll come out in the future. And that's really where the shift will be, where it'll be refocusing. Another thing is I think there's going to be a lot more focus on the integration of technology and education. And we saw that with the presentation earlier. And I actually listened to the panel in the morning, and someone mentioned about how robots will be more of like our companions, and really integrating that into our daily lives. So yeah.
Okay, great. So with that, let me give each one of the panelists just a couple of minutes to make any closing remarks, provide any advice to parents they might like to provide, and we'll finish up with the panel.
I can start. So to finish up, I definitely have to say a big thank you to my parents and my family for being so understanding and for taking a lot of their time out of their days to put effort into me. Actually, my grandma is out in the crowd today, and so that makes me feel really happy. And yeah, I really like to thank Nysmith School, the Nysmith School, and Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology for providing me with such great opportunities in my life. And I really hope to continue in technology and to continue to learn and love learning in the future. So yeah.
Thank you.
As a family and you're moving forward, looking to inspire your children and think about those next steps, try to make sure that you create moderation. One of the things that we talk a lot about at TJ is the stress, the overload. The presenters that were just here were talking about it, and TJ has actually joined a network of schools. They're called Challenge Success, and we're really looking at how our students and how our families are able to manage all of the high demands that there are today and all of the expectations that are out there. And one of the key principles that we've learned about out of the Challenge Success Network is something called PDF, and that means playtime, downtime, family time. Those are going to be really, really important to remember. If you get to a point as a family and as students out there, if your mom and dad are saying, let's go to the movies, or let's go to grandma's house, and if you're saying, no, I can't because I have too much schoolwork to do, that should be a red flag right away. We can't sacrifice time with each other and take that time outside of school and just let it consume all that we're about. So just think about that moderation. That's the best advice that I can give.
I should have saved you for last there. So that's great advice. Yeah, I played a lot, and then I did homework when I had to do homework, and I hope I wasn't too far off. But I think my one element is this, which is just be prepared, whether it's students or parents, both. Be prepared for this amazing journey. Allow a lot of flexibility. We don't know what we want to be when we grow up. None of us do. You know, you might want to be an astronaut, and then next thing you know, you're doing policy. And that maybe that's one part I have to answer your question. The science fiction of today is where STEM will be 20 years from now, just like you were talking about. I was thinking about that, like I should have just said that. So all right, get that out of the way. But I think you don't always have to be in a STEM job. it's so amazing to see what you guys have talked about, what you learn. And with that base of STEM education or STEM expertise, I went to a policy job. You know, the most exciting day was when, more paper came in or something like that. But you have such impact, and they hire STEM smart people to do business jobs, to do international relations jobs, to do policy jobs, because you're smart. You know what you're doing. You can't be fooled with the technology tomorrow. And the policies, the relations of tomorrow require STEM. So don't be afraid to go out. It's kind of what you said earlier. Don't be afraid to go outside of your STEM comfort zone to try jobs later in your career there. So that's all.
Great, thank you very much.